AM 970 WSTX.
All right. Welcome to Reflections Thursday. Yes, the great, fantastic, outstanding, just plain excellent Thursday, the one that lays the foundation for that Friday that everybody's always giving thanks for. But always remember, it starts with Thursday. Okay. On our last day of 2015, I've got a treat for you. I've got John Obafemi Jones, a local artist doing interesting things, and he's got an exhibit going on at the 5th in the Frederiksted Museum, and then again on the 7th simultaneously in the Top Hat, Art of the Top Hat. And then, of course, on the 15th, there's also the art show here in Christiansted at Canagata. So we're going to play this interview. It's pre-recorded, so we won't be taking calls. Okay. However, we will be talking about his art. Good day. My name is Douglas Canton, and I'm here today with John Obafemi Jones, a artist here in the Virgin Islands on St. Croix, and we're here nestled somewhere in the woods up in a hillside in Frederiksted. Actually, as you can see behind us is a beautiful view. We've got the mountainside, the landscape, the sea, the birds, the bees, anything you could probably think of. Probably some iguanas hanging around out there somewhere too, and everything else.
Plenty iguanas.
All right, and we got the lush tropical trees. We got a mango tree here that's laden, and it's just plain beautiful. So I can see how it can be a great environment to be an inspiration for artistic subjects, as well as everything on St. Croix that could be artistic. So first thing I'd like you to do, John, is go ahead and tell us a little bit about you, your journey as it's brought you here into the world of art and doing this service and expression to the people.
Okay, well, let me welcome you first, and thank you for coming. This is my studio. I work out of here. I've been on St. Croix since 1979. That's when I first came. I've been an art teacher in the public school system for 34 years of that time, and I've always painted, though, from the day I got in, and even before.
So are you saying you were born with a paintbrush in your hand?
I wish that was so, but more like a pencil. And I started doing art, I guess, in kindergarten. I recognized that I liked art. I really enjoyed not so much doing the picture, but the act of drawing, and I've been drawing ever since.
Fantastic. So you've been drawing in high school. Were you involved in any type of exhibits or anything?
Well, I would always be drawing in elementary, and by the time I got to junior high, let me back up. In elementary, I'd always get in trouble for drawing in the back of the class, and I was kind of like a victim. But by the time I got to junior high, I had this lovely art teacher, Dr. Patnay, and he recognized that I might have had a little talent. I won't say, I was the best or something like that, but he saw I had talent, and he recommended to my mother that I go to the Art Students League, which met every Saturday at the Metropolitan Museum in Manhattan. We lived in Brooklyn at that time, and I started going to classes, and I continued that until I graduated from high school. So as I went to the classes on Saturday, I started drawing. I went from drawing and charcoal, and by the time I graduated from high school, I was drawing and I was painting as well.
Since high school, what was the art life like after high school?
Well, like I said, I was born in Georgia, in the deepest southern part of Georgia, right on the Florida border. But as many African American families at that time, and even Caribbean people, they all migrated north, or a lot of us did. And my parents migrated to Brooklyn, New York. But the fortunate thing for me was that we happened to live like 2 blocks from Pratt Institute, which is like a leading art school. And I really never had that much connection with Pratt, but just watching the students go in and out, because they had this big fence around to keep the community out. And one day, a friend of mine, my best friend actually, we snuck into the gymnasium at Pratt, and we got in a pickup game, and the guys we were playing with were on the basketball team at Pratt. And, we were beating them actually, and the coach for Pratt Institute came up, and I didn't know him from Adam. He said, "You want to come here? I'll give you a scholarship." And consequently, I got a basketball scholarship to Pratt Institute. I did plan to go to college. I was going to go to Winston-Salem and play ball, but being that Pratt was an art school, and I knew of it, and it was right in my neighborhood, I chose to go to Pratt.
All right. Okay. Fantastic. All right. So how did the Virgin Islands come on your map?
Oh, that was the best thing. When I was at Pratt, when I went to Pratt, it was, it might have been 20, 15 black students. And very little was discussed about the African art or Caribbean artists or African American artists and stuff. So this was like in 1969, and a lot of stuff was going on in the country, the civil rights movement and everything. And at some point, I got this is Ocean Hill Brownsville, which was a public school in Brooklyn. The community took it over, and they offered art classes at night. And a friend of mine was teaching. He was actually the illustrator for the Black Panther Party, Jim Dyson. And I went, and he started questioning me about African American artists, the Harlem Renaissance artists and stuff. And I was like scratching my head. I did not, and I went to high school, college, and I really had I've heard of it, but I didn't know anything about these people. And I started questioning. When I got back to school, I was also an officer in the Black Student Union at Pratt. And we did some demonstrations, and consequently, it got back to the coach that I was kind of active in the Black Students Union and stuff. And he confronted me one day about why was I doing this. And even the bottom line was, he told me that I can always get another player if you want to be political. And it was like, I was a good student, and I was a good player. And I said, wow, it told me my value. And after talking to some other basketball players that I grew up with, they were saying, why I stayed here. And then I was also recruited at FIS. So I called the coach, and the next day he sent me a telegram and a plane ticket to come down here to play. So I wound up at FIS, and there I met a lot of Caribbean people. They had a Caribbean organization, student organization, and a lot of my friends turned out to be Virgin Islanders. Alan Laws, he was a teacher at Woodson, and a couple of other guys, Lucy Richards. They all were at FIS, and I became very familiar, or we started to become familiar with the Caribbean culture. And when I graduated, my wife came down. She was recruited to teach, and I came down for Christmas around this time. I was thinking about that today. December 17th, in 1978, I came to visit her. And growing up in Brooklyn, it was not a great neighborhood. I love the way people talk about how great Brooklyn is now, but the Brooklyn I know was rough, okay? So, but when I came down here, there was no harassment. The people were so nice. and I had a loft that time in Tribeca, and it was cold, and I started questioning. I was saying, why am I busting my butt up there and it's so you can go to the beach. It's December, and I never went back.
Food for thought, right?
Yeah, I never went
Good
back.
food for thought, and here you are.
Here I am.
Exactly.
I don't even want to go. I mean, a lot of my friends, they ask me why, as an artist. They say, oh, the gallery's up there and stuff, but I wouldn't trade this for $1 million, to be honest with you.
So in terms of your daily regimen here in Paradise, what's your typical day like, Mr. Artist?
Well, I wake up, I get up like at 4:30. Usually I try to, I run a couple of miles in town, around town, and I come back. I'm trying to be back by 6. I have my breakfast, and then I start painting. When I was working, it was pretty much the same, but I would work and then come home at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then I would start painting. But now I'm able to paint straight through. So I paint till about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And that's been really good for me as a person. And this is the best time of my life, because it's not so much, I'm able to just paint and just do what I like doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, tell me a little bit about your family in Georgia. I see you have a beautiful painting here. I see lots of faces. So you came from a medium-sized, large family
Well, my parents, who are the people holding my children, that's my dad and my mom. They were sharecroppers. Their parents were sharecroppers, and my great-great-parents were slaves. The building that you see behind there is the one-room shack that I was born in. We're from what they call the Chattahoochee River Basin, which is like the lower part of Georgia, which is from Columbus, and it runs up to Macon. And there's a lot of poverty there. Most of the black people or black folk that live there are sharecroppers, or were sharecroppers. But it was a harsh place, and my parents left there in 1951 and moved to Brooklyn, New York, which is where I spend my developing years. We have 5 daughters. They all, except for one, attended public school in the VI. They all grown, and one is still here. One is a doctor who wants to come back. One is a lawyer who was a clerk for Judge Donahue. One is a physical therapist, and the other one has a degree in psychology. But they all attended the education complex, actually, where I worked at.
Well, what we're going to do now is segue a little bit into some of your art. Well, as I look at your family picture, it's wonderful scenery, colors, the light reflection. It makes you stop and look at the details, which is, you pass by picture/art all the time and you just pass by. But there's something, I guess the word that comes to my mind is kind of richness in that picture that makes you stop and look. One of the themes that I see in your art, one of the things that is a favorite subject of yours is the Bambula dance, the Bambula dancers. And I see that some trends from a layperson looking on at your art that we'll talk about as we go through. But in this one example, one of the things in Bambula, I mean, the attire for Bambula as a general proposition is white. Okay, and I can understand that in the sense of white and the flow of movement, especially in a darker environment. And it's just my observation, and your painting may not represent day or night, but to me, the use of the blue and darker shades of blue as well as the other accentuating colors, but it seems to appear like it's something that's happening in the evening or at night. Tell me about
as an artist, like one of the best things that ever happened to me was when I transferred to Fisk. And at Fisk, I was able to meet all the great American stalwarts of art. And I say that, I don't even want to say African, because they just happen to be African American, but I met like Elizabeth Catlett, Ramir Bearden, David Driscoll. All these guys were powerful artists, but they also taught me, or they weren't actually, they would visit the school other than David, and we would talk about the significance of art as an African American. And one of the things they drilled in me was that we have to, as artists, it's our job to perpetuate or preserve or define our culture. We can't allow other people to define us. And in the Bambula, I think is very significant of the Afro-Atlantic culture, or what Afro-Atlantic people are about. And now what I mean is, like, you look at some of the dances you see the youth do today, it's very I want to use the word, I don't want to, it's so commercialized. That's, where the Bambula still uses a lot of the African norms, and that is multi-dimensional. Like, I started doing the Bambula, I was walking my dog behind the ballpark one day by St. Gerard, and there was some young ladies under the tree there, and they just caught my attention because they were practicing. I think they had practice inside the hall there, but they were just warming up, I'm assuming. But their movement was so graceful and so magical almost. And then I started, and it clicked, and I said, man, I'm gonna go home and do that. So I did a couple. And then the more I started studying and reading about Bambula and the significance of the Caribbean, it's in Brazil, it's in New Orleans, it's something that we do. And I'm sure the people in New Orleans is not calling the people in St. Croix and say, hey, we're going to do this. So they're not copying, it's just something that has been passed down for centuries, actually. And there's a connection and a big part of our culture. And I think that I try to do it in an abstract way, and that I want people to think about it. Just not just say, oh, this is pretty, because I'm almost at a point where I don't want to do any more Bambula, because I see a lot of people are doing it as well. And I don't want to commercialize it and make it something that's just, I don't want to use the word, I use the word, in my mind, I don't want to make it like Louis Armstrong, where I want to make it more like a Miles Davis kind of thinking. When you listen to Miles, you have to think about it a little bit. And, or even some of the calypsos, like I like Boots, or some of the songs that Spiral did, where you listen to the lyrics, but you had to think. Mm-hmm. And I want my art to be like that. I don't want you just to say, oh, that's so nice, and like you were talking about the colors and stuff. But that means you're looking at it. It means you're thinking about it, and you're trying to figure out, was it night or was it day? Why is it even white? And I want people, and the more you think about it, the more you divvy, like say, I'm sure you're very familiar with Bambula, but not everybody else is. Mm-hmm. So maybe you'll go home and pick up a book or go on YouTube, and I think Dr. Chinzara has a couple of videos on YouTube about Bambula. I know she's written about it extensively. and you'll look it up and see about not just your roots, but about the culture of the Afro-Atlantic and stuff. So that's my goal as an artist when I do the bamboo dance.
As I look at these young ladies here, and you can see the communication. There's a communication and expression, and that almost like every movement has a meaning or is important. There's one here that your name is for it is dancing in the sun with your back to the clouds, and I'm looking at it, and the painting is different from the others in the sense that I see these lines that look almost like the material is made of rolls of towel-like cloth.
We're in a struggle here, and that but we gotta just turn our back to that, the hardships and the things, and just keep dancing and moving towards the sun. And I think that is significant again with the dance, because I mean, how could you go through some of the things that we have gone through, and you'd be crazy. You just flip out. But we dance. And we don't dance in a way that it's okay dance. The bamboo is powerful, it's intellectual, it's a lot of movement. It's like you say, the lines and it's just a beautiful dance. So we just got to keep pushing forward.
Here I have another bambula movement in art, and the colors are very, very different. What was the inspiration and thinking here as we get more into the orange, red shades?
Well, even with these pieces, okay, one of my goals as an artist also is that I think, again, going back to our Afro-Atlantic culture, which is people that were descendants of slaves or came across from the slave trade, is that music. We couldn't write, we couldn't read. I mean, they took all that away. We did, but when we got here, they stripped us. But what they couldn't take was our music. So we improvised. And in my paintings, what I'm trying to do, and I haven't reached it yet, is I'm trying to make my paintings as ethereal or as fluid or as mystical as sound itself. Like when I paint, a lot of times I'll have my music on and I'm painting to the music, so a lot of times I might just take the paint, I might throw it, and whatever comes out is what comes out. So I'm improvising, which is like, again, going back to the bamboo. A lot of the movements in bamboo are improvised. They're not like choreographed. There might be a bass or a chorus line, but the ladies do their own thing. Their movements are all their own. Whatever they're feeling at the time is what comes out. So
that's interesting. But we're going to be talking, of course, about your art with regards to music. But what I kind of heard in between the lines there is music and the mood and the inspiration. So music plays a big part in your expression of art.
It is going back to my parents. Okay, when I was a little boy, I spent a lot of time in Georgia, and my grandfather was a phenomenal guitar player. People from Macon all over come to get lessons. All my uncles, all my aunts can sing or play the guitar. My mother she's passed, but she can really sing. So music was my orientation from early on. So I've always been into music. And what I've come to learn is, it was a reason for that, is that, like I said, as a people, we use that as a vehicle for a lot of different things, in terms of learning, in terms of sending messages, and, like Bambula, going back to Bambula, it's like, the Bambula they would go from different plantations, and that just to entertain, but they could pass messages and what's going on and pass the news and stuff like that. So music is so important.
I have another piece here that when I look at and the brush strokes, and you talk about looking mystical, the bambula clothes look like you could just reach out and touch it, but instead of touching it, that your hand would just go through and kind of like disappear as it goes through. It's just something about it that looks like, yes, it's closed, it's there, but yet it's not there. It's more mystical. It's a dance, an inspiration,
Okay.
or a communication that's going on in front of you. Just no different than some of the stuff in the Bible where something appears to you.
Well, that's what I'm reaching for. Like I said earlier, I'm trying to make my paintings as close to how we hear music. And in this particular piece, this was kind of successful in that I was able to, I'm not always successful at getting it, but like I might do like the pieces you saw earlier, those are basically they're small, like usually no more than 16 by 20, but they're studies. And what I'll do is I'll take the ones that I really like, and then I'm going to do them in a, this is a large painting. It might be like 3 feet by 4.5 or 3 feet by 5. And with that, I will come back and I'll use this technique. Is a technique where I stand, and I'm really into it. I'm able to swing the brush and sling the paint, and I'm trying to just make it as mystical as music itself. And like I said, this is one of my more successful attempts of trying to, I call it visual music, trying to create visual music.
Well, in art, there's lots of different definition of success, I would think. One of which is achieving the effect that you want to achieve, and touching other people's minds in the process when they see it. And I switch here to one that's no longer in your possession because it did a fantastic job of touching somebody's mind, and they said, "Hey, I want that one."
Okay, well, surprisingly, this is another one. I did that one right after I did this one first, and then I did the other one that you just showed. And with this one, I'm still, as you can see all the paint on the ground, I'm just throwing the paint and I'm experimenting and trying to really get sound with the color. And even every day, that's my goal in life, really, is to make my colors turn to sound, or my thing. And like I said, I don't know if I'm ever going to achieve that, but I'm always going to be reaching for that.
And the dress is powerful because of those strokes in a different style, and caught my eye.
Well,
That
you.
one and the previous one
Yeah.
definitely caught my eye in that regard. There's one in particular, and it's still bambula, and it's when I looked at it, the song "Brown Girl in the Rain" came to my mind.
Okay.
Because it kind of looks almost like they're holding hands and dancing in a circle, but that's not in fact what's happening. They're expressing themselves in their dance, but just happen to be in a circular format as I looked at it harder. But the colors are definitely different. This would be happening for me down at Bodo Park and at the waterfront, or in Frederickstead and in Christianstead, let's say down by the fort on the lawn down there, because the green and the contrast and the almost Madras. I call it almost Madras because when I think of Madras, you think of the swatches, the different the different plaids and so forth. But this is more solid. But the colors, the orange, the purple, the green, the contrast, and how they jump out. This is an eye catcher also. It's alive.
Right. Well, this is actually a makeover of a very famous painting. And what it is, this is actually my first bambula painting. And actually, because like I said, I was watching the young ladies, and if you notice, the women in this piece are very bird-like. Actually, I was sketching some birds, and if you notice, their arms lift up like wings. And so I'm saying to myself, because they're so light, and so birds are so light and fluid, and things. So and then I'm looking at the masterpiece of this, and I'm saying, oh, I can connect it all, and thing. But I still, with this piece, I wasn't getting the feeling of music. So actually, I did it, and then I decided to put the if you notice, the swirls with the music, the color in the background, the lines and stuff.
Yes.
And that was my connection to the music itself. But again, I'm very moved by bamboo. It's something that I might, like I said, I'm studying it more, and I admire the women that do it, and I think they're very important to our culture. I don't think they get enough props.
With that, we can segue over into your art of music-related topics, visions, people, activities. What was your inspiration for this piece? It's called Bajo los Arcos de la Luna Azul.
Well, actually, I'm a big fan of the Blue Moon. I used to spend a lot of time at the Blue Moon. Some of my favorite musicians are Freddie Williams. I mentioned Patty earlier. Eddie Russell. And I use this Hispanic name. I love Eddie when he does a lot of the salsa and the Latin and merengue. He does it very well, and it's a flavor. And sometimes if you catch it on a good night at the Blue Moon, it's really they rock. Look at Sonny Rollins, Fire Down There. That's one of the all-time great jazz numbers. That comes from a Danish lullaby that Sonny Rollins sang. Tommy and Mother hummed to him when he was a little boy. He took that tune, turned it into a jazz piece, and it's known worldwide. You can't go nowhere, and
they strike that up, and
exactly. But it emanated from the Virgin Islands.
So I see the theme of musical groups performing, and this one in particular, I know that sometimes when you on your paintings, from what I see, you strategically put paint someplace that looks like it's spilled, and in this case, it creates an effect of like a special curtain background or a special backdrop that was made just for these guys here performing. But what was your inspiration in doing this piece?
Well, again, like with music, it's very linear. It's very textured. Like the bass has a texture of its own. The saxophone has. Everybody has a different texture. So how do you deliver that two-dimensionally? So in my case, what I'm trying to do when you see the drips and stuff, I'm trying to give the painting a texture, and hopefully it will be, that's my connection to the sound. I just don't want to draw a guy playing a trumpet or a saxophone or whatever. I want to make it as close to the music as I possibly can, and when I do those lines I like making marks. I'm what they call a mark maker. I like making marks in my painting. I like lines a lot. So that's my way of using lines, but not in a conventional way. So when you see the drips, I'm using the lines, but I'm using it as abstractly as I possibly can without shifting the theme, which is music. And again, that's part of that Afro-Atlantic norm or African norms, because that's part of the, how you say it, I'll give you a best example. Think about Cubism, which Picasso borrowed from African art. It's multi-dimensional, it has different planes and stuff. And so in my paintings, I don't want to be a cubist. I want to be more of an expressionist. But I also want to have multiple dimensions within that painting.
Of course, this is a signature piece. Fire Down There.
Right. Like I grew up in the same. Actually, I was a newspaper boy to deliver newspapers, and I used to live at the Sonny Rollins building, and I would always see him in the building. And to me back then, I must have been in junior high. He was the coolest guy I ever saw, because he had this big afro and the goatee and the dark, he looked so cool. And when he would walk down the neighborhood, he always had his horn with him in the case. And, he really didn't speak to a lot of people, but he would just walk down the street and he just looked cool, and I always said, man. And then when I started listening to jazz and I was a big fan, I started buying his albums and stuff. So to me, that's like my tribute to Sonny. And I even, there were times when I even tried to make he was so cool, so I just wanted to be cool like Sonny Rollins. And he's still living, actually, and he's doing well.
All right. Well, I know that you've participated in several exhibits. One of them was titled Fire Down There, and that one is the most recent one?
That was the most recent one. I've had exhibits. Me and my wife, we did a show at the Rosa Parks Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. That was towards the end of last year. I also did a nice show at Howard University's Blackburn Gallery. That went pretty well. I've shown around the country in Atlanta, and stuff. But unfortunately, that's the only drawback for being here. We don't have enough galleries here, I feel. So you always got to put your and plus, it also gets people love. That's what I wish more of my contemporaries would try to show off Island, because when you tell them you're from the Virgin Islands, that just opens up a lot of doors. Because people think that Caribbean artists a certain way, but and then when they see what other Caribbean artists are doing, not just myself, they realize that we have a lot of contemporary artists in throughout the Caribbean, not just on St. Croix.
Well, sometimes we have things kind of hiding in plain sight, because Fire Down There was displayed at your art display was at Waltz Metal Works. Now, I drive by Waltz Metal Works all the time, and the last thing that was going through my mind was an art exhibit at Waltz Metal Works. And so sometimes it's just there, hidden in plain sight.
Exactly.
And this is where, when they do have exhibits, and to the extent that you have influence with anyone in education in the schools, to arrange a field trip to come out to an exhibit like that at a Walsh Metal Works. Top Hat is in Christiansted, and it's right there, kind of in your face, because as you walk down the street, there are these big windows and you can see inside. The Frederiksted Museum, less so, in the sense that they have to literally be open for you to appreciate what's inside. So and those are the three that just jump out in terms of size, location, geographic, but we know that there are a lot of other studios
they're quite
around. And so I'm going to jump right back into music, because you have quite a bit of art that is capturing scenes and environments of music, and there are a couple that jumped out here, and I'd like to talk about. You have a couple of young ladies here that are doing their thing, and I want to start off first with Miss Ebony Redbone here. And she's got that double bass, and she's standing there just all a matter of factly like, hey, me and my boy, we having a conversation. That's what I see when I look at this.
Okay, well, usually when I do a piece, like right now, I'm into this improv. I'm trying to research improvisation. But as I travel and try to understand those concepts, I come across other elements. And one of the elements that I came across, and I've not developed, but these are the only two I've done up to date, but I plan to take it further. A lot of the early blues singers, a lot of the early Calypsonians were women. But we don't get that. We don't get that information. So at some point I'm going to do a series of women. These are more like experiments. That's why they've not been really shown or anything like that yet, because I want to develop it more. But women in music have been well overlooked, and that's the beauty of, or the significance of art. I could do a piece and start a conversation about women. Like Bessie Smith was one of the first blues singers. We always talk about the blues when we think about B.B. King, but it wasn't no Bessie Smith, there would not be B.B. King. You see, so we need to have a discussion about like some of the great female Calypsonians, or it goes on and on and on. But I'm just saying that it's overlooked. So I do the women. Like I said, these are the beginning of a study or a series of women.
Local Caribbean flavor in your art, and there are a couple of pieces here that jump out at me, and one of which you've got the Quelbe Jazz King. As I say that, we know that when you say Quelbe, certain names come up, but in this case we're talking the jazz flavor, and there's one name that comes up, and that's Eddie Russell. And from the first time I saw this, and this is more like a collage, or
it's I would call it mixed media, because there's a little bit of everything. There's a little crayon, a little pencil, a little paint, cloth is in there, and that's Eddie. Eddie plays so many different. He can go from one end to the other end. I remember he used to be the music teacher at Complex for a bit. And he can teach classical music. He can do a little bit of everything. So, but I know he's always talked about developing the concept of Quelbe jazz as a jazz, and I kind of like it when I hear it. And this was inspired. Again, I was at the Blue Moon, and he wasn't playing the trumpet, which is his main instrument. He was playing the. And for some reason, he was feeling it that night, and I just had to go home and do a piece. So I did that in a night. I came home and I had to get it out. Yeah, so that's the end result of that.
Okay, and then we have this piece here, which features some of the more traditional or legacy instruments, the banjo, and the ass pipe, and guitar there, and the colors. Anyone from the Caribbean who's been paying attention to what they've been seeing growing up, this will communicate to them, I think.
Well, like I said, I'm very interested in the development of the instruments and stuff. Like in the process, I'm doing a show at the Top Hat in January, and prayerfully it'll be a little different from what you've seen with the Bambula and the groups, and that the focus is going to be on the instruments themselves by the traditional Caribbean musicians and stuff. But I want to do it in an abstract way where it gets you to think about the artists that play them. I mean, like, to me, it's amazing that these guys can play the ass pipe, and that you can go to Sam's or guitar friend and get a guitar or a trumpet or whatever. But these guys actually took a tailpipe
and fashion a musical instrument out of it.
Exactly. I think that's to me I mean, it's amazing. It's genius.
All right.
You know.
Well, you took an interesting turn there, talking about the future. An exhibit in January. Where are you going to be exhibiting?
Okay, in January I'm gonna be in several exhibits. I have about maybe 40 paintings right now, and no one gallery can handle them, and two, I want to categorize them, and that the one at the top hat will be more of a assemblages type work, which means it'll be like collage, but mixed media collage, and that will be the one I'm going to focus on the instruments. Like this. This is a sketch. It's actually sold it, but this is a sketch for some of the bigger pieces that are going to be about the instruments and the history of the instruments. Then that'll be January 7th, and it'll run to the 31st. Then on the 14th, I'm having a show at the Caribbean Museum Center. And that will be focused, the focus will be on the bambula dancers and the use of improv and music. And it'll be a lot about, I guess, not just Caribbean jazz, but jazz in general and stuff. And then I'm going to do a show with the Artist Guild, which I'm a member of, and I'm going to have some pieces. That'll be just kind of like a mix of everything. But I'm looking forward to the one with the top hat, and that the stuff will be very different than the stuff I'm going to have at the museum center. And it just gives me an opportunity to experiment more. So these pieces will be more of a, I'm using like coconut palms, and like I said, I've already got I'm still trying to find a tailpipe, and but I'm trying to create the traditional instruments, but in a two-dimensional fashion. So I'm working, as like I said, when you came this morning, I was working on them at that time. But that's my passion right now.
Okay. It's the life you live and the life you enjoy. Art is a wonderful thing. The arts in general is something that we need more of in terms of exposure for our young people. It just adds something to character that you just can't quantify or put a money value on.
It enhances the quality of life in our community. I mean, if you look at some of the really nice, I'm so proud of the kids. I have some of them in my class, or students that I've taught. The barrels that are going out now around the island and stuff, instead of just having the drabby barrels. And what it is, it gives the kids ownership in terms of the community, which kind of surprised me, because when they started painting the barrels, they got so into it, you know, and it was like they take ownership. This is my barrel, you know, and it also gives a place. Like I run, and in the morning I run through town, Frederiksted town, and sometimes, you know, the Kentucky boxes and the Napoleon boxes and stuff, people tend to sometimes dump them. But since they put those barrels, it's hard to find. It's still trash, but nothing like before. Nothing like before, and it just enhances our quality of life, I think. You know, and I ain't talking about for the tourists. I'm talking about for us that live here.
Yeah, well, you know, we've moved from it's just a trash can to, come, let me show you the one that I did.
Yes.
You can see that young person with the excitement on their face.
Exactly.
You know, so all of a sudden now they're attenuated to trash and things that they did before without thinking. All of a sudden now they're thinking about it.
Yeah,
and it's a trash can. No, it's more than a trash can. It's art.
Exactly. And it's like I said, gives them a chance to express themselves.
Okay. So, John Obafemi Jones. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing more of your artwork around and more of your insight into what the art says, yours and otherwise. In the meantime, I just look here and I say, wow, St. Croix is beautiful, it's wonderful, and the artists here give that much more value to the experience in the process.